Strength of Africa TV presents Africa, where life begins and where life ends. Before the borders, before the empires, before memory itself, there was Africa. Here, in the deep valleys of Tanzania, the bones of our oldest ancestors lie cradled in stone. The Homo habilis, the Australopithecus, the earliest flickers of human life, found not in Europe or Asia, but beneath the African sky. Africa is not just the birthplace of a people, it is the origin of all people. Every language, every genome, every civilization carries her echo. In Africa, life began. From the crowded markets of Lagos to the quiet hills of Lesotho, from Cape Town's cosmopolitan skyline to the fishing villages of Zanzibar, and though time has passed, her pulse never faded. She evolved, she endured, she gave rise to kingdoms that rivaled the world's greatest. Mali, Kush, Nubia, Great Zimbabwe. Civilizations rooted in wisdom, trade, science, and art. But Africa is more than a continent. She is a memory, a beginning, and perhaps the world's last great answer. Africa, where life begins and where life ends. This is not a eulogy, it's a revelation, a rediscovery, a prophecy that in the twilight of global uncertainty, it is Africa who may light the way. Africa is vast, beyond measure. A mosaic of 54 nations, over 1.4 billion people, and more than 2,000 languages. It is not one story, it is many, braided together by land, spirit, and survival. It is a place where rhythm is not just music. It's history in motion. In every drumbeat, a memory. In every song, a story. The scent of suya, Berbere, and jollof. The clatter of traders, the shout of poets, the rhythm of life, unfiltered, unapologetic. From savannas teeming with wildlife to deserts older than time, Africa is nature's raw manuscript, home to the last truly wild places on Earth, a sanctuary for the Earth's heartbeat. Here, ancient and modern do not compete, they converse. Africa is a continent that holds tomorrow in one hand and ancestral memory in the other. This is the soul of Africa, a people who create despite constraint, laugh despite loss, rise despite gravity. Here, wealth is not always counted in currency, it is measured in connection, in kinship, in knowledge passed from wrinkled hands to tiny fingers. For centuries, Africa's art, intellect, and beauty were stolen, misnamed, misunderstood. But now, her voice is returning, not to ask, but to declare. A new generation is shaping an old land, with Wi-Fi and ancestral wisdom, with ambition forged not in imitation, but in identity. Africa is rich, too rich, perhaps. Rich in diamonds, gold, oil, and soil. Yet the truest riches lie not beneath, but above, in her people, her culture, her unyielding spirit. To understand Africa is to understand that life here is not endured, it is embraced, fully, fiercely. For centuries, the world came to Africa, not to learn, but to take, not to listen, but to dictate. The land was mapped, its people renamed, its riches extracted. Colonialism, exploitation, invasion masked as salvation. Independence came, but freedom is more than a flag, and the chains that bound Africa were not always metal. To the outside world, Africa became a headline, a tragedy, a charity case, a land of need, never of possibility. But what the world forgot is that struggle does not mean surrender, that even under the weight of misrepresentation, Africa rose. Her children scattered, some in search of safety, others of opportunity. The global narrative painted them as burdens, but they were builders, dreamers, survivors. Africa's wounds were not all inflicted by outsiders. Corruption, misrule, foreign puppetry, these too left scars. Power, when hoarded, becomes poison. But there is a new language rising, spoken not in silence but in code, in protest, in pixels. The youth are no longer asking to be seen, they are showing themselves. Africa, the least responsible for the climate crisis, suffers its worst. Is this justice? Is this the cost of resilience? And yet, she stands every day. Her people rebuild, reclaim, and reimagine. Because survival here is not the absence of pain, it is the presence of purpose. Africa's struggle is not a footnote, it is the foundation of her power, the truth beneath the distortion, the strength behind her silence. Every continent faces crossroads, but Africa is at a turning point, not defined by crisis but by choice, not by scarcity but by potential. In the age of the digital, Africa is not catching up. She is leapfrogging, skipping cables for mobile, turning sun into power, turning challenges into catalysts. A continent once seen as a consumer is now a creator. African solutions for African problems, built by African hands. This is the youngest continent on Earth, over 60% under 25, a demographic storm of creativity, energy, and vision. As the planet turns to green solutions, Africa is already leading, harnessing her greatest resource, not oil or gold, but sun, wind, and people. The borders drawn in Berlin are fading in practice. Africa is talking to herself again, trading, collaborating, dreaming together. Those once stolen, or those who left, are finding their way back with knowledge, with capital, with purpose. The return is more than symbolic, it's strategic. For too long, others told Africa's story. Now, she speaks for herself, and the world is listening. And what of the African woman? No longer just a symbol of suffering, but of leadership, of movement, of momentum. Across languages, religions, and histories, Africa is stitching together a new fabric. Resilient, united, unstoppable. This is no longer the Africa of cliches. This is the Africa of emergence, of evolution, of excellence in motion. We began this story with a phrase, Africa, where life begins and where life ends. To some, it may sound fatal, final, a quiet conclusion to a turbulent tale. But what if it means something else? What if where life ends is not death, but destination? Not a place of endings, but of return. As the world convulses, from climate collapse to political instability, Africa remains in many ways untouched by excess, still rooted, still breathing. It is ironic that the very land once fled from may become the refuge, that what was once dismissed as undeveloped is now redefined as resilient. Africa is not waiting to be saved, she is saving, offering sanctuary, offering wisdom, offering balance. The winds are shifting, the maps are changing. And for many, Africa is no longer the place you leave, it's the place you return to or run toward. Everything that leaves must return. Even the river finds its way back to the source. And so perhaps the end of life is not death, but rediscovery. A place where the race pauses, where the noise fades, where the future regathers its breath, where life ends may very well be where it begins again. Every ending carries within it the seed of a beginning. Every chapter closed is a page turned, and Africa is writing a new story. This story is not about pity, not about waiting. It is about rising, about choosing, about becoming. A continent not defined by what was taken, but by what is being made. Not by war, but by wisdom. Not by lack, but by legacy. And what of the world? Will it keep looking backward or turn to where the future quietly grows? Africa, where life began, where the human story first took its breath, and now where a weary world might find its second wind. Africa, where life begins and where life at last belongs. Africa, where life begins and where life ends. Thank you for watching. This documentary was brought to you by Strength of Africa TV, the channel that showcases African resilience and glory. If you've enjoyed this channel, please follow us, like us, and subscribe to the channel. And please don't forget to leave your comments. Thank you for watching